All right, so we have some questions in the chat. Meleika, do you want me to read your question or do you want to ask it verbally?
I think Meleika had asked to have it read, was her preference.
Okay. I believe she was the first. Okay. So, residents have been attending the reparations meeting regularly and have voiced since the beginning that it was turning into a housing program that anyone can get anywhere. Am I frozen? Okay. That anyone can get anywhere and that it was not reparations. People have to get qualified by a bank in order to receive their reparations. The banks played a role in redlining and injustice. So now they will be standing to gain again off the backs of Black people. My question is, why didn't the subcommittee listen to those residents at the beginning stages of reparations? Why are they still ignoring them? The Jewish community endured terrorism and injustice. How was the Jewish community given reparations? How does it compare to how the stakeholders of the Evanston Reparations have designed for the rollout for the Black community? So that was 3 questions in there, and I can repeat it if you guys need to. And are you guys able to see the chat as well? Okay, so that was kind of like a 3-part question. And then I'll open it up to whoever wants to address those questions first.
I'll take a stab at it, and I might have to get the last question.
Okay.
I think that I recently attended this reparations subcommittee meeting. I think that this is part of the reason I'm running for mayor. This is what I have seen for 22 years in Evanston, that the people's voice isn't heard. And it doesn't matter how many meetings you go to or how loudly you speak or how many hundreds of people you have supporting whatever your initiative is. The city tends to think it knows best. And when the city thinks it knows best, it does things like set up a reparations program that isn't truly a reparations program. And so I think that that's a problem that's just endemic. And I think that it's why we've got 30 people running for the aldermanic seats. I think enough is enough, but particularly in regard to reparations. They cannot link reparations to housing and where people have to get approved for a mortgage. It would be like giving you a stimulus check and then telling you that you had to buy a new car with it. It makes no sense. And it would be more insulting because it's the reparations program is because of harm that has been done to you. So I think the city just sort of does things in this way where they think they know best and they move ahead, whether it's a solid program, whether the community agrees with it, whether it's got metrics for success, it just tends to kind of move forward. So I think we always need more data. We always need more citizen input. And I think this is part of the important part of the reparations. I listened to Meleika had something on Evanston Live, and it was Bennett Johnson and Reverend Neighbors, and it was talking about the Jewish segregation in Evanston too, which I had heard from someone else in town, but I didn't realize how prevalent that was as well. So I think that going forward, I always like to say, okay, we're here now. We know what we need to do moving forward, and how can we do that in the way that we're best informed and for the best success. And I think that most of that, oftentimes the experts in my mind are Evanston residents. They know, they've been here. They have a great idea what success looks like for Evanston residents. And I think that in most cases, having more community input and taking our time to get it right is always going to be important. And what was the last part of the question then?
So first it was, how was the Jewish community given reparations, and how does, how they handle that compare to the stakeholders of the Evanston Reparations, what the Evanston Reparations stakeholders have designed for the rollout for the Black community?
So I'm not familiar with how the reparations was done in the Jewish community for Evanston, so I really can't speak to that. But I think that whatever the harm was and however the repair was made, I'm guessing if it was a successful program, that it had more community input, and that the people who had suffered the harm felt like repair had been done. And if not, then maybe we need to go back and revisit that as well. So I just think until we get this right and we're sure that the community accepts it and that it's not just another program for the city of Evanston to, have residents pay into a housing program somehow, then I think that we need to really take a step back and make sure we're getting the best input.
Thank you, Lori. Sebastian?
Oh, yeah, when it comes to this question, because it is multi-layered, that I see the unwillingness to actually listen as a lack of leadership in the reparations subcommittee in particular, but just in city council as a whole, and city government as a whole. And this happens when you have elected officials who are longtime politicians, but it also comes with age as well, and that's no knock to anybody who's older than I am. But I believe that I come from a unique perspective where I am still a student, and a big part about being a student is, yes, you're in charge of problem solving and understanding the problem using whatever the facts and knowledge that you have on the issue and creating a solution. But at the same time, my job as a student is to listen to others as well, to take in that information and then formulate a solution. And I think that's what we're missing from a reparations subcommittee, is that instead of really working towards a solution, and that includes listening to residents and their concerns, we're skipping that part altogether because we believe that we already have the solution in mind. We know what's best for the community, so this is how we're going to go about doing it. They're not in office, so how would they know how to best solve this problem? And that's the wrong way to go about doing it. And I believe that Evanston as a whole requires a leader that is going to sit down and listen to the problems that Evanston residents have, and then tailor the solution to those, that community engagement. I'm not totally familiar with the reparations that Jewish residents received in Evanston. I know that there's a reparations program in Germany following the Holocaust and the reparations that the Jewish community there received. So I'm not really familiar on a local level on what that looks like. But I mean, just using that as a focal point is that following the Holocaust and the horrors that was, that the Jewish community received reparations and received, this compensation from the German government, and that they felt that this was wrong. They admitted that it was wrong, and they did everything in their power to remedy the solution and then educate their populace on what happened, what went wrong, and then how can we make sure this never happens again. So I believe that that's how we should look at it from a lens in Evanston, that we did a wrongdoing. Let's educate individuals on what exactly Evanston did to the Black community, and it's currently doing to the Black community, because there are still some policies that are in place that negatively impact the Black community. How can we remedy that? That's going to the community, listening to their concerns and actually formulating a solution based off of that, and then actually putting it into implementation. And doing all three of those will create a reparations program that can be replicated nationwide, where we can truly see some progress in this issue. And that, again, that we're not cutting corners, and that we're setting an example for the rest of the nation to follow.
Thank you, Sebastian. Danielle?
Great, thanks. And it's a multi-part question. I'm going to try to address all of the parts in order. First of all, I don't think there's anybody in this race, or frankly, almost anybody in this town, who's spent as much effort and energy as I have combating malfeasance in the financial sector and predatory behavior by banks. It's something that I care very, very deeply about, and it was even kind of my first job after I was in the legislature was working specifically on Wall Street reform. So I'm not happy about the fact that the system by which we do homeownership in America is heavily reliant on mortgages from these institutions that are really problematic. That said, that is how we do homeownership in America, and I think the feeling here is, as much of a problem as we're trying to take a bite out of by addressing reparations, also overhauling the entire mechanism of home loans is something kind of beyond our scope. And so I don't know how we can help people with home ownership specifically in a way that doesn't also wind up with the bank somehow involved as a middle entity, as frustrating as that is. To the bigger question about people being frustrated, of course there was a lot of community discussion and a lot of community input that went into the current iteration of the reparations program. But I think the frustration speaks to a problem that we have again and again and again in Evanston, where for a number of reasons, people don't feel like they're actually being heard. The way that we give public input leaves people feeling as though it was kind of hopeless all along and wondering, should I even come back next time and bother to give input another time? And I feel very strongly that we have to be aggressive and transformational in the way that we do public engagement in this community, the way that we intentionally build truly diverse groups of stakeholders who are at the table, not at the last minute when a vote's about to occur, but well in advance when we're actually figuring out what different policy options to even choose between. I think the failure to do that successfully has left our community with cracks and fissures and factions that are hurting us a lot. And so I am committed to, in this issue and in every other aspect of the city's conduct, to fundamentally transform the way that we get public input so that people understand they actually are being heard, right? And I think there's a lot of question, how do you make people feel heard? And the answer to that question is not to worry about what you're making people feel. Instead, make sure you actually are hearing, and make sure that you're changing your behavior based on what you heard and what you learned. And then once you do that in a visible way, the problem of people feeling heard will take care of themselves. I think we should be worried much less about the performance and much more about the reality. And to the last point, I mean, certainly, Lori alluded to the fact that there were pretty awful anti-Semitic segregation practices in Evanston for a long time. That's unquestionably true. That said, speaking just for myself, as a Jewish Evanstonian, I do not believe that the Jewish community is owed reparations from the city of Evanston in the same way that I believe the Black community absolutely is. I think that
I'm sorry to cut you off, but I just want to clarify Meleika's question, because I think she didn't mean reparations for the Jewish community of Evanston. She just meant after the Holocaust.
Got it. And I was going to get to that also. And so I will say that my grandparents, who were Holocaust survivors, received reparations from the German government. And I'll just say that they appreciated the reparations as a token, right, as an acknowledgement of wrongdoing, but they sure as hell didn't feel like it repaired the harm. And obviously, doesn't matter what number is on the check, it's not going to bring back all four of their parents who were murdered. But they didn't see it as compensation to repair the harm that was done. They saw it as just a sort of concrete, on paper admission of guilt, and therefore some sort of show of good faith that we're going to try not to do it again. And I think that's important, and that's a piece of what we ought to try to accomplish at Evanston. But I don't think that's the end of the story, right? I don't think to say we mean it, we're really sorry is adequate, because we are still dealing with concrete inequities today that were caused in large part by the city's actions. And that's just visible in the wealth gap, for instance. And so I think that provides a special additional layer of responsibility that we have to concretely repair the remaining concrete harm, not just send a signal of remorse.